Yeah, so I'll just say a brief set of remarks for standing in the place of Congressman Cummings, which I will share with my co-chair. President Obama and the Democratic Party know that there is no greater responsibility than protecting the American people. We also understand the indispensable role that the United States must continue to play in promoting international peace and prosperity.
The next set of speakers are going to provide recommendations to help guide and shape our 2016 platform and show America's role in the world. They know that it requires that we provide for the safety and security of the American people, and that requires close collaboration with allies, cultivating partnerships with new friends and centers of influence, and strong American leadership within international institutions. And now for our first witness, we will call Michael Posner, former Assistant Secretary of State for Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor. Before that, he's currently the Jerome Kohlberg Professor of Ethics and Finance, Professor of Business and Society at NYU's Stern School of Business. Before that, he served in the State Department, and before that led for many years Human Rights First. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And as you say, I've had diverse professional experiences both in academia, government, and with the non-governmental sector, and my comments reflect that. First, a broad comment. Both inside the government and out, I've witnessed the power of American global leadership and our ability to make a difference on human rights and democracy issues. The United States has unique influence to raise these issues and to protect the most vulnerable people on our planet. Now more than ever, we need to redouble those efforts and use the power of the internet, which is a new tool. It was almost 70 years ago that Eleanor Roosevelt led the effort to adopt the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We need to continue to lead. To do so is morally right, consistent with who we are as a people. It makes us stronger, safer, and more secure. We need to lead also by example, and even on the places where it's not so easy to do so. This is why President Obama banned torture in 2009, why he and the administration continue to work to close Guantanamo, which is a recruiting device to our enemies. We must work to ensure the fair, full equality and expanded opportunities for women and girls. This means tackling discrimination, marginalization, rape as a tactic of war. It means investing more in women's employment, health, education. Promoting women's rights as a human right is not only the right thing to do, it's a strategic imperative. We also need to recognize that gay rights are human rights. We must actively combat efforts by other nations to criminalize homosexual conduct and to ignore targeted violence against members of the LGBT community. We need also to pay attention to the issue of human trafficking. 27 million people in the world are victims of trafficking. This is an affront to our values and a source of funds for criminal organizations and extremist groups. It threatens us all. More broadly, we need to support labor unions and others who are on the front lines, not only in the fight against trafficking, but forced labor, child labor, and other abuses here and elsewhere. Two final points. We need to continue to speak out against the persecution of religious minorities, whether they're Christians and Yazidis in Syria who are being attacked viciously by ISIS, acts of anti-Semitism in Europe, or other abuses of religious minorities around the world. Our foreign policy must prioritize efforts to combat religious persecution wherever it occurs. And finally, the world today faces the greatest humanitarian crisis since World War II. More than 20 million refugees from Syria and elsewhere. We can't do this alone, but we need to be in the lead, and that means accepting more Syrian refugees and providing support to the UN refugee agencies. These are all issues which help to define us as a party, and I strongly urge that they feature prominently in the Democratic platform. Thank you.
Ambassador Sherman.
Mike, thank you for that. I think everyone in the Democratic Party feels that upholding human rights is absolutely essential. So I'd like to ask you, since you have traveled the world and worked to move human rights forward both in the private sector and the public sector, what kind of an impact do you think Mr. Trump's language is having in terms of the things he's saying about tolerance in our ability to be a role model around the world?
He's being destructive in so many ways. I can't get to it in 4 minutes and 35 seconds. But I will say this. One, I think the tendency towards isolating us and withdrawing from the world is exactly wrong at this moment. We need to engage. When we don't engage, our leadership is missed, and it undermines us domestically as well. We should be a leader. It makes us safer and stronger. But secondly, his bellicose statements, his racist statements, the range of things that he said are creating panic in the world, frankly. I travel a lot, and everywhere I go, people are saying, what's happened to this country? How could you go from Obama to Trump? So we need to be, I think, clear as a party that these are issues that help define us as a nation, and we need to reinforce both our engagement and our principled commitment to human rights as universal values.
Have you noticed and are at all worried about what seems to me a worrying trend of foreign governments making it very difficult for foreign NGOs to operate within their boundaries? And do you have any advice for us about how we might address that?
When I was when I was in the State Department, we began to see this trend. Laws on association, restrictions on foreign funding, attacks against human rights advocates. We saw it in a range of countries around the world. I sent a memo up to Secretary Clinton talking about the headwinds. It's only intensified in the last 3 years. And I think we need to be clear, the change occurs from within societies, but it can't exist if it's strangled, if there isn't the external support, and especially coming from the United States. We need to be creative, we need to be bold, we need to look at the long game. At the end of the day, it's going to be rights groups, women's groups, and others inside societies that are going to navigate change consistent with their society, but they need support, they need protection when they get in trouble. They're getting in trouble all the time. And I think, again, that ought to be a central feature of our policy going forward.
Are there any other questions? Yes, Bonnie. And Congressman.
Yes, thank you. I have traveled, around the world with certain NGOs and have seen some of the devastation caused by human trafficking, and I agree. Too many women, children, and men are being impacted by this, and yet there's nothing we could really do to stop it. It's a recyclable business. It's more lucrative than heroin. So how do you suggest that we tackle a situation like that?
Well, I think there are a couple of things that we can and should be doing. One, as a government, we ought to be engaging with local governments that are where this is happening. That's not enough by itself, but we shouldn't take our eye off the ball that every government ought to be protecting its own people. Secondly, we ought to be doing whatever we can to empower local unions and activists who can be part of the solution within their own societies. And third, and this is sort of what I'm working on, it is what I'm working on at NYU, there's a role for American business and global business to also reinforce the best things that need to be happening. It's not possible in a global supply chain for a big company to say this is not our responsibility. They're the beneficiaries. In fact, we're all the beneficiaries of cheap products that are often the product of people being enslaved or working in inferior conditions.
Thank you. Talk for 30 seconds, if you can, on human rights advocacy and promotion and democracy promotion, and to what extent you view them as the same issue or slightly different issues?
I think they're part of a constellation of issues that are interrelated. I'm about to go with NDI on a mission to Georgia this weekend, which is a democracy promotion effort which NDI and others have done for many years and very effectively. At the end of the day, though, when we talk about democracy, the elements of it are empowering women, rule of law, a free press, the ability of unions to organize, free expression. All of those are human rights issues, and so I think the The smart thing is to integrate democracy and human rights as part of an integrated whole, and that's what we ought to be advancing.
Thank you very much for your testimony and for the answers to the questions. And now we'll go to our next witness.